We have Dr. Matt Renzi coming up. We're going to talk about how violent incidents can affect your mental health. Let's get started.
From the front lines of violence prevention, digging into the details that matter. Get ready for a 15-minute fast-paced information download that will prepare you to ask the critical question. When disaster strikes, are we good? Now, here's Jim Bennett.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We have Dr. Matt Renzi, who's a licensed professional clinical therapist. He's also a combat Marine veteran. Thank you for your service. And he is also a therapist who works with a variety of different families, first responders, military families, those individuals needing that extra support. And so we're just excited to have him with us here today. Matt, thank you for being here.
Hey, Jim, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here with you today.
Excellent. Well, let's dive into this. And I want to kind of give a little bit of structure to this conversation for our listeners so you can kind of understand where we're going to go with this. So, this is really a conversation about post incident, like what happens after the fact. We're going to talk about everything from those critical incident survivors, those that witnessed it, those that were there, to those that had to take actual action. So, first responders, law enforcement, sometimes citizens, public have to take action. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to keep this really relevant for everyone because we want it to be beneficial to all of our audience. But we are going to start with our conversation in the world of law enforcement. For those that are members of law enforcement, you're very familiar with a lot of what we're going to be talking about. But for everyone else, I think this is going to be a real eye-opener to kind of understand what law enforcement looks like in response to incidents. You know, a lot of times we kind of see them as almost superhuman, right? Because they can just do such amazing things. They have to take amazing action. They see horrible things that no one should have to see. But we know that there's a toll that it takes on them. And as much as we think they can be completely resilient, they're a human being as well. So Matt, could you kind of take us through law enforcement side of the world of what's that toll look like on, let's say, someone who responds to an active shooter incident? And feel free to kind of take it from the officer that engages to the officer that comes in after the violence occurs and they're processing the scene, those sort of things.
Yeah, well, the event and what event happens is really a critical factor because some events you have where it's just a kind of shooting, it's just a high stress event, and there's not like added factors like media involvement or the optics look bad on it, or there's like an kind of investigation, something like that, that then happens afterwards. So each event's going to be a little bit different, but an officer going into an event like that, let's say they're one of the first people on the scene, they're an active shooter, that type of officer tends to get a lot of support afterwards. People are aware of what's going on. They have their own kind of struggles because depending on how the situation goes, maybe there's like a dog and pony show, there might be media coverage on it, there might be their own sense of like how they responded to something and kind of whether or not like they feel good about what they did. The officers that come usually like after the fact or aren't the first ones in, aren't actively responding, maybe they set up a cordon, they're just they start to feel like support staff. In that situation, there can be this kind of sense of like helplessness that comes up or guilt that I didn't get to get in the game. I was on the sideline of the big game, but I wasn't able to participate. And that creates a whole nother series of actions, especially if like an officer goes down in there or civilians are impacted. There's this kind of sense of, I was there, I should have done something, and instead I was directing traffic. What the hell? All of those are like at a normal event, how an officer would respond. Then you add on, oh, my department's throwing me under the bus, or they're making me go do counseling or something like that. And that creates all these additional layers of frustration, resentment, like I don't want to do this or I don't feel supported in this, which can lead to further kind of issues.
Right. And I would assume kind of even just building on that. So you have officers that respond. Hopefully, there's some engagement, the perpetrator's stopped and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then you also have many other officers who are on that peripheral, as we said, but they're close to the front, but they're not the ones that are actually engaging that person.
Yeah.
And or the person took that many more lives, maybe they took their own lives, and they feel this loss of like, why couldn't I get there sooner? Why couldn't I stop him? And I'm
Yep.
sure that's a big factor as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we're running a research study right now where those type of officers, the officers that are there at the event but don't actively get to respond, actually do way worse in the long run than an officer that actually like pulls the trigger as part of a shoot, gets to respond. And it's the sense of agency.
Yeah.
I have control over what was happening. I was able to make an impact. I showed up and did my job instead of I was right there, but I wasn't able to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge piece of like how someone does after an event like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to go totally off target here, but that's a research project you're doing with the Belanti Net team. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a quick little commercial, but because I want people to see this, is eventually when their research is done, you'll be able to see that in the squad room of the Good Squad. So we'll talk more about that later, but we want you to check it out because they're doing some great work. I've talked to at least one of the other contributors to that, and there's just some incredible things. And it's not just for cops. It's really to kind of understand what takes place in those situations and how it affects those people. And some of it can be translated into the average person's real world. So
Yeah.
check it out. We'll let you know when it's available. Is there any kind of typical process that most individuals go through in managing these stressors? Or is that too generic? Is it really something that's very unique to each individual?
Yeah. Is there a typical process? There's a typical process, and then there's just kind of how each person they're going to do with this. When I'm working with a first responder, law enforcement, fire, EMS, something like that, it's a different context because their Tuesday is somebody's worst day.
Yeah.
If they show up to a suicide, it's Tuesday. I'm going to go get a coffee afterwards. I'll write a report on it. That person's life is devastated. Now, for a first responder, you get really good at compartmentalizing then because I got to like take that, put it in a box, and then go coach my son's baseball team or whatever. And I can't like unpack the hundreds of things that happen in a year that are really bad.
Yeah.
So for the first responder population, they got to think about what type of kind of hygiene they're doing with all those events, because those events build up over time. And maybe it's not the first infant death that gets me, but by the 10th one, I'm struggling a bit here. And what am I doing to, like I take a shower each day to take care of the dirt that builds up on my body from just going through life? What are they doing to hygiene with all the experiences they have on a daily basis in the course of their work?
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout my career, I've heard plenty of comments of, I'm okay. I can handle it. This is my job. This is what I do. I've seen it before. I guess my question is, are there people who can totally be so strong and not affected by anything? Is that possible?
Yeah, you're called a sociopath.
Okay,
I
that
know,
category.
yeah. So, well, but, I mean, the person that's not affected by anything is a sociopath.
Right. Okay.
Now,
I'm affected.
yeah. The thing about kind of law enforcement, or if your profession is to constantly do this stuff, where I typically see it pop up is retirement. You got to slow down. And then everything you've been stuffing down into that jacket box starts to pop back up because you don't have anything to distract yourself.
Right.
And it's not a happy Jack in the Box. It is a world of horrors.
Right.
And that's when the nightmares start. People start drinking. They have cardiac events. All types of things are coming up. And it's 30 years of cramming stuff in and keeping in this box. And now there's so much in there. I don't even know where to start to unpack this stuff.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? And
it makes total sense. And I see it.
And Jim,
definitely.
the thing is, not everybody's going to develop PTSD.
Yeah.
The fact of it is most officers aren't going to develop PTSD. Does that make sense? Like most of them are. Yeah. But it's going to have an impact. What are you doing with that impact? And I've seen this now. I did 3 combat tours with the Marine Corps, and the buddies I went through that with, like, you either do something about it or it does something to you.
Right, absolutely. Well, I guess that folds right in really well to my next question is, what are the risks of avoiding support? And obviously that list is longer than our 15-minute show, but just
Yeah.
some of the high points on that.
Yeah. You're going to find some way to manage whatever's going on. So some guys get into substance use and that's how they start managing. And that works for a while, or it works until it doesn't work. With substance use, I always say it's really effective, but it's got teeth. Other guys like, or guys or gals, sorry, most of the people I work with are guys, but guys or gals they go through the relationship mill,
Yeah.
or you develop some type of other addictive-ish behavior. So gambling, you get really big into hunting, maybe competitive sports, something like that, and you just pour yourself into something else rather than like dealing with what's going on.
Right, right. No, sadly, I've seen that many times, as you've seen it as well. So why? I mean, we've touched on this, but just take another moment or so of just why people hesitate to seek support. Maybe any of the other kind of things you're seeing out there as these roadblocks. Maybe they're just a mental roadblock to seeking support after witnessing something or being a part of a violent incident.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of kind of roadblocks. I mean, for any first responder, the first thing is I need to have my head straight to be able to do my job. I got to be on my game. And so if I come in and say, "Hey, I need to see somebody," there starts to be uncomfortable questions about where's my mental state at. I don't want to lose my work. I like what I'm doing. The second thing is I don't want to be seen as anybody that's broken.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
we all know that guy that got medically retired or separated out because he went off the deep end, and you're like, I don't want to. We might talk nice to him when we're on the phone with him, but other guys are cracking jokes about him when we're in a meeting or grabbing coffee or whatnot like that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I don't want to be that guy. Third thing is, I don't want my agency to be snooping down my neck on this or telling me what to do. Fourth, like, therapists aren't exactly known for being the most like first responder competent population. So am I going to go in and talk with this therapist and they're going to make me like grab a teddy bear and talk about my feelings? Like, I don't want to do that crap. I just don't want to have like nightmares and yell at my kids anymore, you know?
Right. Right.
So there's a bunch of reasons on like why I might not do this. And I think one of the most insidious ones, and this was a big challenge for me, is if I just think about my problems enough, I'll be able to solve it on my own because I'm a really driven, competent person.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, as always, we're tight on time in our 15 minutes, but I want to take a moment and we're going to cover a lot more in the squad room. So I'm excited for everyone to join us in there because we're just touching the tip of the iceberg on this, more to go. But I want to take a minute now because there's so much you've said that really relates beyond emergency responders and emergency services, law enforcement, fire, EMS, etc., and military as well. It goes beyond that, and the average person can be in the middle of these situations. So, can you take any piece or all or whatever of what we just kind of talked about? Now, let's translate a little bit to those that are not emergency responders, military.
Yeah. It's hard to know kind of how any individual is going to respond to an event. What I typically talk with people about is if the event's sticking with you, if it's a sticky one.
Yeah.
And usually you know that it's sticky if it's sticking with you for more than about 6 months. I mean, the DSM's got categories, but I usually like to say, hey, most people get through these things. You don't need to see a therapist.
Right.
But if it's sticking with you and you're like, man, this one is with me, it's good to reach out and check in with a therapist, especially a therapist that works with trauma, works with kind of reactions to events, things like that, because you don't want to let that orchard grow for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Because it's going to create a bunch more problems.
Yeah.
And once it's been growing for 30 years, it takes a while to get undone.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I like to say to people is there's no microwave solutions to orchard problems.
Right. It's well said. So, let's just kind of compare here. We've talked a lot about emergency responders. Can a person who is not an emergency responder have those same feelings of, I wish I could have done something. So in other words, something's unfolding in front of them. It's a mass violence incident. It's a shooting. People are being killed. And they're looking at, I have no tools. I have no knowledge. I don't know what to do. And unfortunately, people lost their lives in front of me. Can they have those? Is there a similarity in the feeling to the officer who responds, but isn't there in time to engage and to stop?
Oh, 100%, Jim. This is a shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. A lot of civilians involved in it
Yeah.
because a very open populated area, a lot of victims,
Wow. Yeah.
or like they should have worked to interrupt the shooting, and this sense of like guilt that carries on from it, and this like helplessness.
Right.
Plus, then you have the added piece of, let's say you're not even someone at the event, but you're like a family member and you let your kids go or you let your spouse go or something like that. And they may not even got hurt, but there's all of a sudden this like fear and control and like, I can't let them out of my sight because something like this might happen again. And so it has ripples effect. And the thing is you got to, each individual person, usually what happens is there's already been something that's been like growing along in their life along this vein. And then an event like that comes in and it just like widens that crack.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks it open. It's been there, but it's not as exacerbated as the event then makes it. And so, yeah, it's all across the board, and it hits people at sometimes really unexpected places. And sometimes they can like, they're like, I know exactly where this came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of my big takeaways from this first part of our conversation is everything we talked about is actually relevant across the board. Now, there's some specifics to law enforcement because they're probably the ones that are directly engaging, an individual who's shooting, let's just say. But there are certainly cases where non-law enforcement has engaged people in very dangerous, horrible situations. But I think my message, kind of taking everything that Matt said, is if you are responsible for an organization, if you're the leader, the CEO, the head of the safety and security, the support team, etc., keep in mind that so much of what we talked about isn't just for cops. It's for anyone in your organization, because we know incidents can happen anywhere at any time, and they will have those impacts. And on the other side of this show, in the squad room, we're going to talk more about that. So my hope is you will join us by going to our Patreon account, The Good Squad, and select that and jump into the squad room where Matt and I are going to continue this conversation. Lots more great stuff to come, and really start to talk about how it impacts people in the workforce as well. So we want you to join us there. Matt, thank you for your time today, and I'm going to see you in the squad room.
Sounds good, Jim. Thank you.
Awesome. And again, thank you all. And don't forget to ask that important question before disaster strikes. Are we good?